You may recall the name Claudine Gray. There was a time when Claudine Gray was in every single news headline. Everybody was running to a microphone on the Trumpy Trump sides to make a comment about the then Harvard president, Eric Trump, Chris Christie, former guy himself, Elise Stefanik, were tripping over themselves to weigh in on Claudine Gray. Mitch McConnell, weird. Mitch McConnell has situations within his own party of xenophobia and hate. Nothing. Claudine Gray, well, he just piled on top. Now, I'll be honest with you, as somebody who has a real deep interest in this subject, I think you're aware, you may be aware that I was adopted by my nan was Polish Jew, so I take a real big, deep personal interest in anything to do with anti-Semitism. But on this particular thing, I just get the idea it's a bit weak in terms of they were concerned when it was a news story, but here we are in January, nothing. I've not heard Eric Trump talk about Claudine Gray. I've not heard former guy. It's irrelevant. They just jumped on it because right then they thought it was a way of getting leverage and saying something about a subject you would think they would naturally have an interest in, but no, just another news point. The reason I bring this up is as we head into election 2024, you're going to see lots of these situations where at the time it seems really immediate, really an emergency, but in reality, well, it's interesting. Vivian Foxx was the person, Krusty herself, heading the hearing, and well, for me, Jamie Foxx and Aunty Maxine just say it perfectly. And I will, by the way, just describe Vivian Foxx's hearing as just an ambulance chaser trying to find an accident for the Trumpy Trumps and that to get all upset about.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Fox and Ranking Member Scott. And thank you to the witnesses for your testimonies today. As the witnesses have shared, anti-Semitism anywhere is abhorrent and unacceptable and must be condemned. I'm privileged to represent a strong, united Jewish community in South Florida. My next-door neighbor is a rabbi. My Jewish constituents have experienced everything from bomb threats on Jewish centers, schools, to harassment of Jewish community members. I stand with them. We talk often, we commiserate, and we pray. We must take a stand against all forms of hate, whether that be anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, racism, xenophobia, and terrorism. This must stop. In Congress for 7 years, I led the fight against Boko Haram, a terrorist group that kidnapped over 300 schoolgirls in Nigeria, gang rapes, beheadings, killing whole families. So I am particularly sensitive to this issue of terrorists and what they do. But disagreements about the conflict in the Middle East should never escalate to threats of violence against any community. We are a civilized society. We must draw a line and condemn hate. Please know that in May, the Biden-Harris administration introduced the U.S. National Strategy to Counter Anti-Semitism, a comprehensive approach addressing anti-Semitism in diverse environments, including college campuses. With that, I have a few questions. Ms. Nadel, based on your knowledge from 2016 to 2020, what has been the United States response to anti-Semitic events? I'm specifically thinking about Charlottesville, Unite the Right, and what the Trump-Pence administration did compared to this administration. Ms. Nadel.
The Unite the Right rally at the University of Virginia and in Charlottesville, Virginia in August of 2017 was, for me, and I believe actually for the majority of American Jews, a major turning point. It signaled that the long history of anti-Semitism in the United States, that it was about to burst out again. And for the first time ever that I know of, Jews who were worshiping in their synagogues, in a synagogue on Saturday morning, and they watched some of those Unite the Right ralliers parade past the synagogue armed, and they had to sneak out of the back of the synagogue because they were afraid that violence would break out. So what we are seeing in terms of anti-Semitism in this moment in time is that it's been rising and rising since 2016. And although President Trump called the people who were the protesters and counter-protesters, said there were very good people on both sides, I disagree. I do not think there were very good people on both sides in Charlottesville in August 2017.
Okay, as I reflected, Professor Nadell, on the horrific events in the Middle East and the subsequent fallout on college campuses, I have been in contact with my friend and former congressional colleague, Ted Deutsch, who now heads the American Jewish Committee. The committee is the author of the AJC Action Plan, a toolkit for university administrators. One of the recommendations is that the university administrators recenter the conversation about the Middle East back to a place of fact-based exchange. Could you comment on why this suggestion is important? And I'd like to, Madam Chair, enter this report into the record.
Without objection.
This action is important because the campuses where faculty who come from Middle East studies and faculty who come from Jewish studies have long been in conversation, not just since October 7th, those are the places where what we do in the university has been manifested in the best way. So I'm thinking, for example, of Dartmouth University, where they held a forum, and they had, in their second forum, 300 people in the room, and they had 5,000 people online. Our universities not only educate our students today, but we can educate the wider public. And so I very much agree. I admire Ted Deutsch, and I admire the American Jewish Committee for what they are trying to do, but this is not a magic bullet. It's not going to be fixed overnight. But we are in the process of working on it and hopefully tamping down anti-Semitism in America once again.
Your time is
Thank
expired.
you, and I yield back.
Mr. Thompson, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for calling this important hearing. Thanks today to all of our folks who are testifying. As we've all
Before I ask my questions, let me do some housekeeping. Under Committee Rule 9, we'll now question witnesses under the 5-minute rule. I remind members that I'll strictly enforce the 5-minute rule. So members are advised to keep your questions succinct so the witnesses have time to answer. Please don't talk for 4 minutes and then ask the witness a question. We've heard from many students that they do not feel safe. You've talked about that in your statements. But the anti-Semitism we've seen on your campuses didn't come out of nowhere. There are cultures at your institutions that foster it because you have faculty and students who hate Jews, hate Israel, and are comfortable apologizing for terror. How did your campuses get this way? What is it about the way that you hire faculty and approve curriculum that's allowing your campuses to be infected by this intellectual and moral rot? President Gay, I'm going to ask you to give me a brief answer. I also would invite you to follow up with more in writing, and we will follow up with you. So I will go down the line, President Gay, then President McGill, and President Kornbluth.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairwoman Foxx. Again, anti-Semitism has no place at Harvard. When we recruit faculty, we do so with the understanding that they are joining a community where we honor, celebrate, and nurture open discourse, both on the campus and in the classroom. And to be a successful teacher and educator at Harvard requires the ability to draw out all of the viewpoints and voices in your classroom irrespective of one's political views. And we devote significant resources to training our faculty in that pedagogical skill and to
Thank you.
prioritizing that in our recruiting and hiring.
Thank you. Ms. McGill.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the question. I'm troubled by what you're reporting about the culture of the institutions that we're leading. Very contrary to the values that I hold as a leader of University of Pennsylvania, as well as the institution, where any form of hate is very contrary to our values. I would venture and answer Chairwoman Foxx that anti-Semitism has a role in the broader society, and that's what we're seeing happening in the society and on our campuses. And I'm committed to combating it in immediate term and the long term.
Thank you. Dr. Kornbluth.
Yes, so MIT is a majority STEM education and research institution, and we are devoted to solving the problems that face society. Our faculty are hired for their brilliance. Now, we allow them to say what they'd like in the classroom in the name of free expression, but we are committed to having them know that that our campus must be a welcoming and inclusive environment. And although they may say what they like in the classroom academically, targeting any individual student, harassing or discriminating is strictly forbidden in our classrooms and on campus.
Thank you. We will be following up with asking for specific plans for disciplining student and faculty who assault or harass students or prevent them from accessing undisrupted classes or campus spaces. We'll be asking for your plan for preventing this rot from perpetuating, how you're going to hire and assess instructors, how will you change how you govern students, and what are the practical steps you will plan to take. I want to ask you one more question. As I've said, and Ms. McGill, I appreciate the fact that you feel concerned about my feeling about the fundamental culture on the campuses that's foundational to this issue, denial of the right of Israel to exist. So I want to ask each one of you, President Gay, do you believe that Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish nation?
I agree that the state of Israel has the right to exist.
Ms. McGill, same question.
I agree, Chairwoman Foxx, the state of Israel has the right to exist.
Dr. Kornbluth.
Absolutely, Israel has the right to exist.
I want to thank our witnesses again for being here and to say we will follow up and to tell you that while we've talked about a larger culture out there, it's the universities who should be examples of what this nation is all about. I yield 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for coming today and to testify before the committee. But before I get started, I want to just thank you for your service to students and to the university community. Dr. Nadell, this question is for you. I'm glad, first of all, to see another Buckeye here, House State. But as a former professor at a small college in North Carolina, Bennett College, for over 40 years I taught there, I am deeply disappointed by the rise of anti-Semitism rhetoric that's happening across the country. Anti-Semitism has no place on our college campuses or anywhere. And it's been my mission to combat instances of anti-Semitism and hate and racism alike. There are Jewish students across this country that are afraid to leave their dorms, afraid to step on campus because of the hateful rhetoric that's infiltrated our schools. So this question is to actually all the presidents, but I did want Dr. Nadell to answer first. Students should be able to express their views and opinions without fear of retaliation. How are you balancing the protection of free speech, academic freedom, with the need to also oppose normalizing anti-Semitism attitudes that are radical and dangerous? And if we could just briefly answer that, I want to hear from the presidents. on this?
Sure. So just briefly, obviously, we need to protect free speech, but we also need to protect the safety of our students on campus. And you use the word normalizing anti-Semitism, and the problem is anti-Semitism has been normalized in the nation, not just on campus.
Thank you. Dr. Gay?
Thank you. I'd say education is the key here. Making students and frankly the entire campus community more aware of the insidiousness of anti-Semitism so that they're in a position to be able to recognize anti-Semitic tropes when they see them and confront them in the moment.
Thank you.
I appreciate the question. At Penn, our policies are guided by the U.S. Constitution. So our longstanding open expression guidelines follow the Constitution. I think in addition to education, which I agree with, so that students and faculty and staff can identify and combat anti-Semitic tropes in speech, I think it's important to call out anti-Semitism in a very visible and public way and a specific way in order to make clear how it's contrary to the values of the institution, where we're talking about speech alone.
Thank you. So Title VI provisions set the standard for what should be done to address racism, hate crimes, and violence on campuses. Do you think that your DEI departments are equipped with the tools to combat anti-Semitism or hate on your campus? And if not, what changes do you plan to make? This is for all the presidents.
I can jump in here.
Yes.
Yes, so our diversity, equity, and inclusion staff are absolutely charged with making the campus welcoming for all students, and that absolutely includes our Jewish and Israeli students. We absolutely see anti-Semitism as an inclusion issue. We're making sure that our staff who are dedicated to diversity, equity, and inclusion are being trained about anti-Semitism, but it goes well beyond that staff. It's important that our leadership understands anti-Semitism, that our students and faculty understand anti-Semitism. And I'll just say one thing about MIT. We can make as many top-down initiatives as we want, but the heartening thing is that the discussion of anti-Semitism and indeed Islamophobia is now proceeding at a grassroots level.
So can we hear from, thank you very much. Next president.
Our anti-bigotry efforts are also informed by a desire to make certain every person at the university feels welcome and can thrive, and that includes communities of faith and ethnicity. That's the value we have, and we're making sure that is from the top of the organization all through the organization. And I believe over the longer term, that's sort of an immediate action. Over the longer term, making sure the entire community is discussing, understanding, and capable of calling out and combating anti-Semitism when they see it.
Thank you. Madam President.
Our DEI office is a resource for the entire community, and the professionals in that office are committed to ensuring that everyone feels a sense of belonging. But in building on an observation that President Kornbluth made, this is a shared responsibility that doesn't vest strictly in the hands of our DEI professionals, but it really is work that needs to be taken up by the entire community, the leadership for sure, but also the faculty and the students, and also doing the work.
Thank you very much. I'm out of time, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you. Ms. Stefanik, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Dr. Gay, a Harvard student calling for the mass murder of African Americans is not protected free speech at Harvard, correct?
Our commitment to free speech...
It's a yes or no question. Is that corrected? Is that okay for students to call for the mass murder of African Americans at Harvard? Is that protected free speech?
Our commitment to free speech
It's a yes or no question. Let me ask you this. You are president of Harvard, so I assume you're familiar with the term intifada, correct?
I've heard that term, yes.
And you understand that the use of the term intifada in the context of the Israeli-Arab conflict is indeed a call for violent armed resistance against the state of Israel, including violence against civilians and the genocide of Jews. Are you aware of that?
That type of hateful speech is personally abhorrent to me.
And there have been multiple marches at Harvard with students chanting, quote, "There is only one solution, Intifada revolution," and, quote, "globalize the Intifada." Is that correct?
I've heard that thoughtless, reckless, and hateful language on our campus, yes.
So based upon your testimony, you understand that this call for Intifada is to commit genocide against the Jewish people in Israel and globally, correct?
I will say again, that type of hateful speech is personally abhorrent to me.
Do you believe that type of hateful speech is contrary to Harvard's code of conduct, or is it allowed at Harvard?
It is at odds with the values of Harvard.
Can you
But
not
our
say here that it is
values
against the
also-
code of conduct at Harvard?
We embrace a commitment to free expression, even of views that are objectionable, offensive, hateful. It's when that speech crosses into conduct that violates our policies against bullying, harassment,
Does that speech
and
not
intimidation.
cross that barrier? Does that speech not call for the genocide of Jews and the elimination of Israel?
When
You
that speech-
testify that you understand that is the definition of Intifada. Is that speech according to the code of conduct or not?
We embrace a commitment to free expression and give a wide berth to free expression, even of views that are objectionable.
You and I
outrageous,
both know
and
that's not the
offensive.
case. You were aware that Harvard ranked dead last when it came to free speech. Are you not aware of that report?
As I observed earlier, I reject that characterization.
It's the
of our
data shows
campus.
it's true. And isn't it true that Harvard previously rescinded multiple offers of admissions for applicants and accepted freshmen for sharing offensive memes, racist statements, sometimes as young as 16 years old? Did Harvard not rescind those offers of admission?
That long predates my time as president.
But you
so I can't
understand
speak.
that Harvard made that decision to rescind those offers of admission.
I have no reason to contradict the facts as you present them here.
Correct, because it's a fact. You're also aware that a Winthrop House faculty dean was let go over who he chose to legally represent, correct? That was while you were dean.
That is an incorrect characterization of what transpired.
What's the characterization?
I'm not going to get into details about a personnel matter.
Well, let me ask you this. Will admissions offers be rescinded or any disciplinary action be taken against students or applicants who say, "From the river to the sea" or Intifada, advocating for the murder of Jews?
As I've said, that type of hateful, reckless, offensive speech is personally abhorrent to me.
Today that
When
no
s-
action will be taken. What action will be taken?
When speech crosses into conduct that violates our policies, including policies against bullying, harassment, or intimidation, we take action, and we have robust disciplinary processes that allow us to hold individuals accountable.
What action has been taken against students who are harassing and calling for the genocide of Jews on Harvard's campus?
I can assure you, we have robust
What
disciplinary
actions have been
processes
taken? I'm not
with
asking.
actions underway.
I'm asking what actions have been taken against
Given-
those students.
Given students' rights to privacy and our obligations under FERPA, I will not say more about any specific cases other than to reiterate that processes are ongoing.
Do you know what the number one hate crime in America is?
I know that over the last couple of months, there has been an alarming rise of anti-Semitism, which I understand is the critical topic that we are here to discuss.
That's correct. It is anti-Jewish hate crimes. And Harvard ranks the lowest when it comes to protecting Jewish students. This is why I've called for your resignation. And your testimony today, not being able to answer with moral clarity, speaks volumes. I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. Mr. Norcross is not here. Ms. Jayapal, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Anti-Defamation League found that reports of anti-Semitism have nearly quadrupled since this point last year, and we're seeing that reflected on college campuses, with Jewish students reporting that they feel unsafe. No student should feel unsafe. I think we all agree. Anti-Semitism and indeed all forms of hate have to be rejected everywhere. And while all of you as college administrators have a responsibility to condemn hate and acts of hate in all its forms, including anti-Semitism, I know that you also face the challenge of and the responsibility of ensuring that people can engage in healthy debates of ideas in a way that fosters safety and inclusion for everyone. So I want to thank you for your commitments to work to ensure a continued diversity of perspectives on your campuses, a diversity of faculty with varied lived experiences. I know that my Republican colleagues have been trying to attack DEI initiatives, including the funding for those initiatives, for some time, and I hope that that is clear in terms of some of the comments that have been made. I want to just give Dr. Gay 30 seconds to respond to anything, given the line of questioning that you had right before, in case you wanted to say anything before I go to my lines of question.
Thank you for the opportunity, but I'm satisfied that I've conveyed our deep commitment to free expression, recognizing that it's uncomfortable.
Thank you, Dr. Gay. Dr. Kornbluth, your institution is one of many that has responded to incidents between pro-Israel and pro-Palestine groups. Many college campuses have been grappling with their responses to prevent anti-Semitism, to prevent Islamophobia and other forms of hate, while also making sure that every student feels safe to express their thoughts in accordance with the principles of free speech and to engage in the idea of critical thought on college campuses, which I think is what many of us appreciated about our college experiences. Can you speak to the challenges that you've faced in condemning hate and acts of hate while making sure that students were heard? And also just want to appreciate the distinction that you made in one of your comments between what we can say and what we should say, and just say that, frankly, I think there's been an explosion, thanks to the previous president in part, that has shattered the norms of what is acceptable to say, and we're dealing with some of the effects of that. But what challenges have you faced in condemning hate and acts of hate while making sure students were heard?
Thank you so much. And I have to
say... And if you can just pull that microphone right up to you, that would be great.
I'm sorry, thank you. I have to say my absolute goal is to ensure the safety of students and the continuity of our research and educational missions. And these recent events have troubled me deeply, and we have mobilized as a campus. I think the most important thing is first knowledge, to understand that, as I mentioned in a previous answer, that our leadership, our students, and our faculty have to have knowledge. But way more importantly right now is these students are thrown together in classrooms, in laboratories, in dormitories every day. This is where the dialogue is taking place. And we have to ensure that they have the tools for constructive communication across differences. We are bringing these discussions to the dormitories. We have a Center for Constructive engagement where the students are going to be able to have small roundtable discussions with each other. We have funded and mobilized, and I cannot tell you how wonderful our faculty have been. They've just issued a statement from 300 faculty about unity and working together with the students. And so there have been lunches, there have been meetings for our Israeli and Jewish students with Jewish faculty, for our Arab and Muslim students with Arab and Muslim faculty, but now they're working to figure out how to bring them together. If we're all going to live and work together productively, we have to move beyond, formal training, which we are committed to, but to actual real dialogue and to actually model constructive and civil dialogue for our students. That's what being in university is all about.
Very powerful. Professor Nadel, these challenges of protecting free speech while denouncing anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, all forms of hate, that's not unique to MIT or to the institutions that are here. Can you speak to the same question of the most effective ways to facilitate education and dialogue to ease tensions at other colleges and in general?
The most effective ways, and obviously I very much appreciate your question, because this is happening across the United States on colleges and campuses, small and large. And the most effective ways are to recognize the many different levels and mechanisms for facilitating these dialogues at the student level, at the faculty level, at the administrative level, and bringing how to unite the campus, bringing the campus together. That's what we're all trying to do, and it doesn't happen overnight.
Thank you all so much for your work. I yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Allen, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want.
Earlier this week, a number of university presidents testified before the House. What was your reaction to that testimony? It's gotten pretty big criticism from Democrats and Republicans alike.
Yeah, I have not gotten the opportunity to actually see the testimony. However, I think it's important for every university leader to unequivocally make clear that anti-Semitism has no place on a single college campus in the United States of America or throughout the world, and that everything necessary should be done to crush anti-Semitism and to make sure that everyone on a college campus, whether you're Jewish or Muslim or Palestinian or African American or Latino or white or Asian American or a member of the LGBTQ plus community, everyone should feel safe on a college or university campus. And university leaders have a responsibility to make sure they're leaning in to confronting the explosion of hatred that we've seen in some instances and on some college campuses. It's also important that our extreme MAGA Republican colleagues actually join us in doing something meaningful about these issues. For instance, President Biden has put forth over 100 recommendations that could be implemented by the Congress to try to address the rising tide of anti-Semitism in the United States of America. House Republicans have not acted on a single one. In fact, what we've seen in some instances is the exact opposite. We want to strengthen the ability of the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights to pursue and address and confront and stamp out anti-Semitism on college campuses, anti-Arab hatred, racism, Islamophobia, homophobia, and all of these other issues. But if you just look at the anti-Semitism issue, right, where there is strong bipartisan concern for dealing with an unacceptable rise in anti-Jewish hatred. One of the things that we can do about it is making sure that the Department of Education of the United States of America and the relevant Office of Civil Rights has the resources and the capacity to address it. But extreme MAGA Republicans in the House actually want to gut and defang the Office of Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Education. Our Republican colleagues are not serious individuals, for the most part, on this issue or on any other issue of significance to the American people, because they're more interested in playing partisan political games.
Ms. Bonamici, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. I appreciate the full committee's focus on this issue. I want to reiterate, as I did in the other hearing we had recently, that anti-Semitism, as well as Islamophobia and other forms of bigotry based on race, ethnicity, national origin, or religion are abhorrent and must not be tolerated. I'm deeply troubled by recent anti-Semitic incidents at colleges and universities across the country, including those whose presidents are here today. And I stand with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle in calling for proactive steps from all of these institutions of higher education to root out discrimination, hatred, and bigotry in all of its forms. I also want to note that the main point of this hearing should be to identify bipartisan solutions to combat anti-Semitism, not an excuse to attack higher education, liberal arts education, or important diversity, equity, and inclusion work that's happening at colleges and universities across the country. There are legitimate concerns about anti-Semitism on college campuses, and that's what we should focus on today. Not doing so is a disservice to the students across the country who are looking to Congress for support for and the public for the institutions. So during the previous hearing, I highlighted my support for additional funding for the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights, and I want to join Representative Courtney in repeating that request today. OCR will be better able to enforce Title VI violations and protect students' civil rights with adequate staff and investigatory capacity. So I want to make that clear. We must do that. Dr. Nadel, thank you for being here and for your work over the years. Public colleges and universities, as we know, must uphold constitutional free speech rights. And many private institutions also recognize the value of free speech and robust debate. I think all of our presidents recognize that today, but also with the understanding that schools cannot allow their campuses to become places where anti-Semitic speech makes students unsafe or feel unsafe. I think that's recognized. So, Dr. Nadel, what are some of the best ways that colleges and universities can work to make their campuses welcome, safe, and inclusive spaces for all students in light of incidences of hate speech and discrimination, while also adhering to First Amendment principles?
So thank you for the question. I think there are different forms and different venues for expanding this discussion of the very difficult issue that has sparked and ignited the anti-Semitism or the outbursts on college campuses that we've been seeing since October 7th. So one form, obviously, is the classroom, although I would remind the members of the committee that the reality is that most students during their college career, they take a handful of courses. Many of them are studying STEM, and most of them are actually never in classrooms where they're hearing a discussion of issues like anti-Semitism or the conflict in Israel and Palestine. So that's the first thing that I would point out. So we academics can continue to foster those conversations, and we need to take them outside of the classroom. I think the other place where there can really be a lot of work done that would be very successful is on the side of student life on campus. And so student organizations are, they range broadly and widely on the campus, everything from a gardening club to obviously some of the student organizations that have been involved in the protests against Israel. So these are other places.
I don't want to cut you off, but I have to get another question in. I'm running out of time. But thank you for your work. And I also want to recognize as well the AJC Action Plan for Confronting Campus Anti-Semitism. President Gay, I understand that there's an ongoing investigation of your institution by OCR because of anti-Semitic incidents that occurred on campus. And I know we'll be closely monitoring the outcome, but in the interim and over the long term, what can Congress do to support your institution and other colleges in preventing discrimination? And also, if you could also respond in the brief time, you mentioned that Harvard will not permit speech that incites violence or threatens safety. And I'd like you also to address who decides that and how and in what time frame.
Thank you, Congresswoman, for your questions. You're correct that there is an ongoing investigation, and obviously I can't comment on an active investigation other than to say we will work with the office to answer all of their questions. And I will say the work of the office is vitally important for ensuring students have access to educational opportunities. So I fully support the work that they do and hope that the office gets the resources that it needs to be effective. With respect to I believe the question was about student conduct. So again, we are deeply committed to free expression, but when speech crosses over into conduct that violates our policies, policies against bullying, harassment, intimidation, we do take action. And we do have faculty-led student disciplinary processes that are quite robust. And even over the last couple of months, as there have been incidents, we've been leaning into those processes, and we do have disciplinary actions underway.
Thank you. My time has expired. I yield back.
Recognized for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to oppose this resolution, which, to my knowledge, would mark the first time in American history that the House of Representatives would vote to tell private college and university presidents to resign. I want all of my colleagues to think very seriously about what this means for us today and in the future. We're all profoundly disturbed by the resurgence of anti-Semitism and racism in campus towns, including death threats, serious death threats against Jewish students at Cornell, and actual shootings and attempted murder of 3 Palestinian American students in Burlington, Vermont. We all want to express our outrage in House resolutions, which we've done more than 20 times as a House of Representatives, and numerous times even since October 7th. For example, on November 2nd, we passed House Resolution 798, which condemned all forms of anti-Semitism on college campuses, denounced any support for terrorist groups on campus, reaffirmed the free speech rights of Jewish students and faculty, and urged enforcement of federal civil rights laws to protect Jewish students against anti-Semitism. So why do we need this resolution? Well, the only thing new about it is that it would have the U.S. House of Representatives call specifically for the resignation of 2 college presidents, a call that has been slipped in at the bottom of page 2 of the resolution. This extraordinary passage comes close to being what the Constitution calls a bill of attainder, which is the unconstitutional imposition by Congress on a specific citizen or citizens of a criminal punishment or stigma by the Congress itself. Although this resolution is not a criminal punishment or stigma against specific citizens, it is undoubtedly a civil punishment and stigma against specific American citizens. How many of you would like the president of the college where you went or where your children go to be walking around with a congressional resolution telling them to resign? Everyone knows that this will be an academic scarlet letter and a professional death sentence for anyone carrying it around. Does anyone think that UPenn's President Liz McGill, who's already resigned in the face of Ms. Stefanik's ceaseless campaign to force her out, will ever be able to find another college presidency? Give me a break. Now, I hold no brief for the college president's overly legalistic, ethically tone-deaf answers awkwardly advanced in response to Ms. Stefanik's rapid-fire yes-no questions. It should not be difficult for anybody to say that in the age of rampant gun violence and lax Republican gun laws, which have put tens of millions of AR-15s into circulation in our society, anyone calling for genocide of the Jews or anyone else should be sent immediately a campus security detail to see if they pose the risk of harm to other people or if they need an immediate mental health exam. And if there's not an imminent threat, surely the call for genocide of the Jews by definition constitutes a hostile learning environment and should occasion aggressive disciplinary action. So where was the common sense on the part of the college presidents? But where is the common sense in the Congress of the United States of America? Calling for the resignation of private individuals at private universities would be a dramatic and unprecedented departure for the U.S. Congress, which has never before voted to tell a college president to resign. Before we affix this lifelong stigma, reproach, and dishonor on a private citizen, do you think perhaps we should offer them some kind of due process? The kind of due process that even George Santos got and that Donald Trump is getting all over America right now for his 91 federal and state felony charges? I request 2 more minutes.
2 more minutes. Gentleman's recognized.
Should Harvard President Claudine Gay, who is the first Haitian American ever to serve in that position, and Sally Kornbluth, who is Jewish, get the chance to explain what they are actually doing to combat racism and anti-Semitism at their schools and what they have done in their lives and in their careers to oppose anti-Semitism and racism, which are the gateway to destruction of liberal democracy? Do we care about that? Or is this just a bunch of drive-by talking points? Is it relevant that the Harvard and MIT boards have made unanimous statements affirming the leadership of their 2 college presidents? Are we saying that their boards don't matter or they are indifferent to anti-Semitism? And the leaders of the Freedom Caucus know better than the Jewish president of MIT what anti-Semitism is? Now, I know these 2 were the presidents testifying before Ms. Stefanik, but are we sure that these 2 are even the worst in the country when it comes to bias and discrimination? Is this a one-shot deal, or, as Ms. Stefanik promises, is this just the beginning? Are we going to go through all the college and university presidents in America? And what about the CEOs of the businesses? Maybe they are not performing to her satisfaction either. And indeed, maybe there are college presidents who've looked the other way in not hypothetical cases of anti-Semitism and racism, but real cases of anti-Semitism and racism. What about them? Are we going to let them go, or are we going to go after them? Maybe we should determine who the worst are before we start using the resources of the House of Representatives to call for people to resign. Are there college presidents, by the way, who looked the other way when there was sexual abuse of college male wrestling team members, rape of students, or female gymnasts, or female soccer players? Are we interested in that now that we are superintending higher education in America? Now that we are the appellate review board for the colleges?
Has expired.
I'd like to request one more minute.
Members are reminded to direct their remarks to the chair. Gentleman is recognized.
Additional 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, are we prepared to become the National Academic Appeals Panel for college presidents, coaches, and professors? Or is that perhaps best left to the universities themselves? Maybe it's that we just don't have a positive legislative agenda of our own to lower drug prices in America, to get aid to our democratic allies in Ukraine against fascist imperialist thug Vladimir Putin. Maybe we don't have anything real to do, so we decide instead to go around and start lecturing to college presidents and college boards all over America. In the absence of a real program for America, the majority is filling our hours with censures, expulsions, motions to vacate the speakership, overthrow their own leaders, and of course impeachment of President Biden. For what? For doing nothing wrong. Nothing wrong. That's all that they give us. And this cannibalistic instinct they've unleashed now turns on private citizens, academic leaders who will wear the scarlet letter A so they can have some more press conferences. I'm voting no on this resolution. I yield back and thank the chair.